The air inside the Capitol hearing room was tense, carrying the heavy scent of expectation and political theater. Every seat was filled, from journalists furiously typing on laptops, to staffers exchanging knowing glances, to members of the public who had lined up for hours to get in. Cameras from major networks were trained on the long mahogany table where Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat, her posture straight, her gaze sharp, prepared for another contentious day. Today wasn't just another oversight hearing, it had been billed as a showdown. The opposition, frustrated by Crockett's rising popularity and unyielding style, had devised a strategy: corner her using the very words of a judicial giant, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. An aide from the opposing side wheeled in a television screen, sparking whispers across the chamber. Few had seen props brought in like this before. The chair banged the gavel, calling the room to order. Congresswoman Crockett, the opposing lawmaker, Representative Daniel Mercer, began with a smirk. "We all know you enjoy fiery speeches. But today, I want you to listen to someone whose words carry more weight than yours, or mine. The late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg." He pressed a button. The screen flickered, showing an old C-SPAN clip. Justice Ginsburg's calm, deliberate voice filled the room. The role of a judge, and by extension any public servant, is not to bend the law to the passion of the moment, but to uphold it with restraint, even when unpopular. Mercer leaned back in his chair, clearly savoring the moment. "So tell us, Congresswoman Crockett, when you advocate with such passion, when you stir outrage instead of restraint, are you not doing the exact opposite of what Justice Ginsburg counseled?" The room buzzed. It was a classic trap, using the words of a respected icon to make Crockett seem reckless, impulsive, and unfit. Cameras zoomed in on her face, hungry for a reaction. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She sat in silence for a moment, allowing the tension to swell like a balloon about to burst. Finally, she leaned forward, her voice cool, steady, cutting through the noise. "Representative Mercer," she said, her Texas drawl sharpened by precision, "the difference between me and you is that I know how to listen to Justice Ginsburg fully, not selectively." She tapped the desk in front of her, signaling to her aide, who slid a folder her way. Crockett opened it, and with deliberate calm, pulled out a transcript. "You quoted Justice Ginsburg, but let's read the rest of her words from that same speech." She cleared her throat and read aloud. "Judges and lawmakers must walk a fine line. But when the rights of the marginalized are under attack, silence is not neutrality, it is complicity." The room erupted in murmurs. Mercer's smirk faltered. Crockett closed the folder and looked straight into the cameras. "So let's be very clear. Passion in the service of justice is not a violation of principle, it is the fulfillment of it." Justice Ginsburg understood that restraint doesn't mean silence, and civility doesn't mean submission. "If you're trying to corner me with her words, Representative, I suggest you study her life first." Because she didn't just speak quietly, she fought boldly. A hush swept the chamber. Some journalists paused mid-type, staring wide-eyed at the exchange. Staffers who had been smirking now avoided eye contact with Crockett entirely. Mercer tried to interject, his voice shaky. "Congresswoman, that is." But Crockett cut him off, her tone now icier, sharper, like steel against glass. "You don't get to parade Ruth Bader Ginsburg as a weapon when you don't honor the causes she bled for. Not when you vote against reproductive freedom. Not when you dismiss racial equity. Not when you slash programs for the very people she fought to uplift." The silence was deafening. Then, almost on cue, the crowd in the gallery began to clap, soft at first, then louder, until it turned into full applause. The chair pounded the gavel, calling for order, but the energy had already shifted. Mercer's face reddened, his plan unraveling on live television. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett remained calm, her hands folded, her expression unreadable, as if she had expected this ambush all along. Outside the chamber, on social media, clips of the exchange began circulating within minutes. Hashtags like #ColdReply and #Crockett vs Mercer trended within the hour. But it wasn't just the confrontation that went viral, it was the sharpness, the calmness, the icy delivery of her words that captured attention. Commentators on cable news replayed the clip on loop. Some hailed it as the moment Crockett defined her political identity. Others accused her of disrespecting a colleague on national television. But the overwhelming consensus was clear: she had turned Mercer's trap into his own downfall. Yet Jasmine knew this wasn't the end. She had felt the undercurrents, the whispers in the corridors, the strategy sessions designed to silence her voice. Today was only the opening shot of a larger battle, and the more viral she became, the more they would come for her. Still, as she left the chamber and faced a wall of reporters, her expression carried no fear, no doubt. Her voice was calm, steady, unshaken. Justice Ginsburg taught us that dissent matters. And sometimes dissent must be loud, must be passionate, must be unapologetic. If that makes people uncomfortable, then I'm doing my job. And with that, Jasmine Crockett walked away, leaving the cameras scrambling, the pundits talking, and her opponents scrambling for a new plan. But she also knew, this viral moment would bring consequences she hadn't yet faced. The morning after the hearing, the clip had already reached every corner of the internet. On TikTok, young activists edited Jasmine Crockett's cold reply into slick, fast-cut montages, layering her words over dramatic music. On Twitter, journalists dissected every line, praising her composure. And on cable networks, pundits replayed the video endlessly, debating whether her performance was brilliance or recklessness. But one thing was undeniable: Crockett's reply had gone viral. In the House cafeteria, aides and interns whispered as she walked by, some offering quick nods of admiration, others avoiding eye contact, wary of being seen taking sides. In the press gallery, reporters had shifted from skeptical curiosity to full-blown fascination. Meanwhile, Representative Daniel Mercer was drowning. The night before, he had gone on Fox News, hoping to spin the exchange as a sign of Crockett's disrespect for tradition. Instead, he was grilled by the host about why he had misquoted Ruth Bader Ginsburg in the first place. Clips of him stammering went nearly as viral as Crockett's reply. By midweek, the White House press secretary was asked about Crockett at the daily briefing. She smiled carefully, dodging the question, but the very fact it was raised showed how deeply the moment had penetrated the national conversation. Yet while the media feasted, Jasmine Crockett herself stayed focused. She knew the cycle of outrage was short, and that viral fame was as dangerous as it was powerful. Still, she couldn't help but feel the tide had shifted. That evening, she sat in her office with a few trusted staffers. A TV played softly in the background, showing pundits arguing over her brand of politics. One aide, Marissa, looked at Crockett with awe. "Congresswoman, you don't realize, people are calling this your RBG moment." Crockett smirked, shaking her head. "I'm not Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I'm Jasmine Crockett, and that means they're going to come at me harder than ever. The more people see me, the more they'll try to shut me down." Her chief of staff leaned in. "They're already planning a second round. We've heard whispers, next week's hearing, they'll try again." Mercer isn't finished. Jasmine leaned back, her gaze steady. "Good. Let them try. I'm not in this building to play safe. I'm here to represent the people who don't have a seat at this table. And if my words shake them, that means I'm on the right path." The following week, the storm intensified. The hearing room was once again packed, cameras trained, reporters eager. This time, Mercer looked more cautious, but also more desperate. He had brought reinforcements, other members of his caucus ready to pounce. Midway through the session, Mercer leaned into his microphone. His voice carried a forced calmness. "Congresswoman Crockett," he began, "last week you invoked Ruth Bader Ginsburg to defend your performance. But I've come prepared with another clip. One where Justice Ginsburg herself criticized displays of anger and incivility." Again, the screen lit up. This time, the clip showed Ginsburg speaking at a university event. Anger, resentment, and self-righteousness are luxuries for the powerless. Those with responsibility must rise above them. Mercer looked around triumphantly. "So I ask you again, Congresswoman, when you raise your voice, when you dismiss colleagues with hostility, are you not indulging in the very behavior Justice Ginsburg warned against?" The trap was obvious. He wanted to brand her as angry, hostile, out of control. The oldest stereotype leveled against strong women in politics, especially black women. The room grew hushed again. All eyes fell on Jasmine. She didn't rush. She didn't snap. Instead, she spoke slowly, deliberately, her tone even colder than before. "Representative Mercer, I'll remind you, Justice Ginsburg was also called angry when she dissented against laws that stripped women of rights. She was called hostile when she wrote opinions defending civil liberties. You know why? Because truth sounds like anger to people who prefer lies. She paused, letting the words sink in. I don't raise my voice because I've lost control. I raise it because millions of people have been silenced. And if you mistake my conviction for anger, that's not my problem, that's your bias. The gallery gasped. Even some lawmakers shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Crockett wasn't just defending herself, she was naming the very tactic Mercer had tried to use against her. She leaned forward, her voice low, each word deliberate. Ruth Bader Ginsburg didn't teach us to be quiet. She taught us to be clear. And clarity sometimes cuts. If that makes you uncomfortable, Representative, perhaps it's time you examine why. The silence stretched, heavy and electric. And then, as if on cue, phones buzzed across the room. Journalists' faces lit up as they realized the moment had already gone viral. By the evening, Crockett's words were everywhere. Late-night hosts played the clip with admiration. Editorials declared her the new face of unapologetic dissent. Young activists printed her quote, "Truth sounds like anger to people who prefer lies," on posters and memes. Mercer, meanwhile, disappeared from public view, declining interviews. His colleagues, embarrassed, stopped defending him. What was meant to be his grand takedown of Jasmine Crockett had turned into his political undoing. But for Jasmine, the victory was not about Mercer. It was about the message. She knew people were listening, people outside the marble halls, people who had long felt ignored. The next time she spoke at a rally back in her district, the crowd erupted before she even said a word. They held up signs with her quotes, chanting her name. She stepped onto the stage, her expression steady, but her eyes glimmered with something rare, hope. She raised the microphone. They can replay every clip. They can dig up every quote. They can try every trick in the book. But let me tell you this, when you stand on the side of truth, there's no corner they can put you in. The crowd roared. And somewhere, watching from afar, her opponents realized, every attempt to silence Jasmine Crockett only made her voice louder.